Hello and welcome to this session of The Ladder, Love Letter to My Sisters in the Pew. I'm doing 18 little teaching sessions. This is for anybody who self-identifies with this topic, and they're streaming on YouTube. And these are little sections from the book The Ladder, Love Letter to My Sisters in the Pew. Which just happens to be titled the same. It's available on Amazon for $9.99, and I always feel like a salesperson doing this, and that is not what I want to be. And it's 99 cents in Kindle form. That's the cheapest I could make it. I'm trying to just get it in the hands of my sisters. I did not feel like this was information that was available to me when I was in my abusive marriage. I loved God and I wanted to do what He wanted me to do, and I didn't feel like there was any teaching on what even abusive marriages looked like because I was not hit. And more importantly, I just thought God wanted me to endure. So we're going to go ahead and get started. This is kind of about this topic, and I think all the topics kind of end up blending together, but anyways, let's get started for today. So this topic is session 4, and it's called But We Said I Do, Signed a Contract. And I feel like this topic is one that's at the heart of abusive marriages with Christian women, because we love God and we want to serve Him, and we do want to be fully committed to our marriage. And if you're like me, you grew up in a home where that was a commitment that you never broke, period, end of story. And so that's where we land with that. I'm going to go ahead and start reading some of these sections. First is 35 through 37, if you're following along. If not, I will read it. 35. This is a little bit from me. I said I do. So it was me who had chosen my first husband. In time, I began to realize that he was broken and I had chosen poorly. I knew some things were definitely wrong with him, but I felt like I was stuck with unpleasant results because that was my choice. So let's take a more in-depth look at this idea of belief, and we're going to read a story called The Story of Pat's Car. Once upon a time, Pat decided it was time to buy a car. Once arriving at the car lot, Pat picked out a real beauty, a red convertible. Pat had signed a contract and drove the car home. Pat had only owned the car for a short time, and everything started to go wrong with it. The paint started peeling, the tires started shredding. Worse yet, it wouldn't start half the time, often leaving Pat stranded and without any transportation. Nonetheless, the fact remained that Pat had signed the contract, chosen poorly, and now had to live with the consequences of that choice. Pat had no previous knowledge of the car's deficiencies. None of these problems were caused by anything Pat had done. Nevertheless, Pat was stuck with a defective automobile for life. Sounds silly? Of course it does. The parallel here is that marriage is also a contract. Both are written or spoken agreements between two parties. Some might say that God's laws make a marriage contract more binding than a car contract. I argue that a marriage contract is much more important than a car, because a home holds a precious wife and sometimes children. Home should be a place of safety. Marriage must not be held in such a high regard that it fails to protect those who are bound to it. The long-term effect of owning a broken car is less severe than living with a broken husband. Just like Pat deserved help for being misled into buying a broken car, wives deserve help for being misled into marrying a broken man. So that is the story of Pat. I'm going to go on to 59. As I said, as a Christian woman, she believes marriage is for life, no exceptions. As a Christian, we hold fast that marriage is supposed to be for life. Whether this is an external from the church or family motivator or an internal self-motivator, it is completely understandable. God intended marriage to be for life. Yet the marriage covenant, as precious as it is, cannot be the sole reason for staying in a bad marriage. Marriage is hard enough when there is two loving people who are striving to care for each other and meet each other's needs. When one is married to an abusive husband, it is not healthy and certainly not what God designed marriage to be. And this is a quote from Darby Strickland, who has really good information. She's a Christian counselor and has some really good information about abusive marriages in the context of Christians. She writes, God intended marriage to be a place of sanctification in which we learn to serve, love, and care for each other. Marriage is not supposed to be a place of self-interest. If your spouse is seeking to gain or maintain control over you, they are violating God's design for the sake of their own domination. And then page 100. Okay. So this I'm sharing a little bit about when you're stuck and what maybe that looks like. Supposedly it stands to reason when there are two people in a marriage and one leaves, that the one who leaves is in the wrong. The fault in this way of thinking is that it can be a healthy person who is leaving an unhealthy, broken person just as easily and even more likely. Why would the unhealthy, broken person leave? They are able to sit in their mess and continue their bad behavior and retain all the benefits of having a healthy person stay stuck with them. And then this is a little portion from Dr. Dobson's book. I grew up very much in Focus on the Family and Dr. Dobson era of teaching. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more here in just a minute, but this is a section of his book. I remember reading it. This was after I was no longer married. I went through a divorce. I'm getting ahead of myself, but anyways, I remember reading this and thinking, oh my goodness, there's just such a lack of understanding. Because what is applied to healthy marriages is also applied to abusive marriages, and it just does not work. So Dr. Dobson writes in his book, Love Must Be Tough, he answers a wife's letter about Mike, who is her husband, who is an angry, controlling husband and father, which also really hurts my heart. She writes, the kids are afraid of Mike too. I just want to pause there for a minute, because how sad is that this wife and her kids are afraid of the husband, Mike. But so yet Dr. Dobson answers, this is his answer to her letter, to teach her how to hold her own with her husband. And there's just such a lack of understanding. Abusive, controlling husbands do not take that well. It is their mission to make things worse when you don't stay in line. And this ask of Dr. Dobson just shows me that he has a complete lack of understanding of abusive homes. So this last section I'm going to go over is, this is, for whatever reason, growing up, I remember learning this quote early on from Dr. Dobson, even in times of great difficulty. And what he writes here is divorce is not an option. And I don't even remember why I held on to this, but I did. And I remember being in this spot of great difficulty. And the difficulty here is it feels very like there's no answers, like you're completely stuck. How much difficult, first I want to get rid of the word divorce, because this is not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about divorce or not divorcing. What I'm saying is that even in times of great difficulty, and I just feel like this difficulty gets greater and greater and greater and greater and greater and greater and greater. And at what point do you say, this is just too much difficulty for anyone to try to endure? There's no out. You're just stuck. You're stuck between this great difficulty, and that's it. Marriage is for life. You're in a great difficult situation, and it doesn't ever improve. In fact, we'll talk a little bit more in a bit, but it does continue to get worse because the control needs to be greater. So what are the options? I just feel like you're stuck with no options. What is the option? What Dr. Dobson is just saying is just endure. And that feels very trapped with no answers. And that's certainly where I was. And this last little section I'm going to read, do I have a page number? 15. It's just a little section of my story. I did some journaling in those early years, and this is a direct quote from a journal entry. And this was towards the end. I knew things were bad. But I just felt like there was nothing to do but endure. There was great difficulty happening, extreme difficulty. And I've heard people read my section and say, oh my goodness, that's terrible. But, you know, what other options do you have but to just stay put and try and make the best of it? If leaving is not an option, if divorce is not an option, if there is no options, you have to endure. There's nothing else you can do. All right, so this is a journal entry from this time. I want to be cherished. I don't even know how to tell him this. I don't even know exactly what I want, but I feel the lack of it like an empty hole inside of me. Maybe this is a dream to expect. I don't know. I've never been married before. I don't even know exactly how other couples feel. I know I feel that I am not living. I know I feel that I'm not living, just existing. So now what? Of course, nothing. Nothing but continue to continue. I've poured through books. I feel like I've jumped through hoops, and he seems to be happy, but eventually he falls back into the same patterns. I hurt beyond what I think I can endure, but I must. The scripture is clear. I can't break my vows. I can't go against God. God wants me to keep loving him no matter what, and I will. I must. I'm going to read this next little section. Looking back at this time, I am saddened that I felt that I was doing what God wanted me to do by staying in an abusive relationship. Understanding how I could be so blind is of vital importance to me. And that is the key of what I'm trying to say today. It's of vital importance to me to share with you. That's not God's design. It's not God's design to stay stuck in this unhealthy marriage. So, anyways, that's some thoughts for today. I probably feels like I'm trying to push an agenda, and I assure you I'm not. I want you to know that if this is how you're feeling, if this is what's right for you, to find a different path, to feel like you can have the support and knowledge to decide what's right for you. So anyways, thanks guys. Bye for now.